This video concerns one of the first significant arguments in moral philosophy. According to a story by Plato, Socrates, 2,500 years ago, wanted to know what justice is. At the time, he was being charged with a couple of crimes for worshipping false gods and corrupting the youth. He'd come to be found guilty and executed for those crimes, but on this day, sometime before the case went to trial, he met a sophist named Euthyphro and asked Euthyphro to explain to him what justice was. Their discussion has since become a common starting point on discussions of morality. For the purposes of this video, I'm not particularly interested in the specifics of ancient history. I'm interested in what is philosophically useful in this story. This concerns Euthyphro's attempt to explain justice. Updating Euthyphro's position somewhat, Euthyphro explained justice as follows. What is just is that which is approved of by God. Now, is this a good answer? For the sake of argument, let's assume that there is a God, that this God is all-knowing, and that this God is perfectly benevolent. There are plenty of places to debate the existence of God, but this is not our concern here. Euthyphro said that what is just is that which is approved of by God. Socrates responded by saying that this was ambiguous. It could be taken in two different ways. It could mean that something is just because it is approved of by God, or that God approves of some things because they are just. What's the difference, and does it matter? Well, let's look at the first option. Something is just because it is approved of by God. In other words, what makes something just or unjust is God's approval or disapproval. This means that if we take something like the torturing of young children with red hair, we can't just look at this and see that it's wrong. We'd have to look for God's approval or disapproval. If God disapproved, it would be wrong. But if God approved, this would be right, perhaps even obligatory. And if this interpretation was correct, a perfectly good God could approve of the torture of these children. Why not? It's not wrong, it's not bad, not unless God disapproves of it. So if God doesn't disapprove of it, then it's not wrong. Clearly this is absurd. We don't have to look around for God's disapproval in order to know that it's wrong to torture young children with red hair. We can know it directly. Since this interpretation leads to such an absurd conclusion, we can use this as a reason to reject this interpretation. One could try objecting to this argument by insisting that God would never approve of such a thing. But again, why not? Would it be the case that God would never approve of it because it's bad? If that's what we're saying, then we're going to the other option. God approves or disapproves of things because God sees that they are just or unjust, good or bad. So what does this mean? Consider again our example of torturing a young child, purely for pleasure. On this interpretation, an all-knowing God would know that this is wrong, that this is something that a good person could not accept. And God, being perfectly good, could never accept a practice that was this evil. So God rejects this practice of torturing children and commands us not to do it because it is evil. But then this means that the wrongness of such an act is independent of God's disapproval. God's disapproval depends on the fact that the act is wrong, not the other way around. And then this means that we still have a question that needs answering. What is it about this or any other thing that makes it the type of thing that warrants God's approval or disapproval? What is it that makes some things just and other things unjust? What is it that makes some things the types of things that God would approve of and other the types of things that God would disapprove of? And the fact that we're left with this question means that our quest to discover what's right or wrong still goes on.